Office design is more than your chairs and your plants. Great office design welcomes patients and makes you more money. How does it do that? Well, my guest today runs an architecture and design firm that helps practices optimize their office space, and she's going to explain how all of this works. I'm Carl White, principal at Mark Advisory Group, which is a healthcare marketing agency, and I'm also the host of Practice Care. The mission for both is the same, and that's to help private practice owners stay private. Usually that's what they want anyway, but everything is better when the provider owns the practice compared to when somebody else does. When the provider owns the practice, they can make all the clinical decisions they think are best, all the scheduling decisions they think are best. They can deal with insurance differently if they want to. They have control. When somebody else owns the practice, they have control. And usually, eventually, their agenda starts to creep into the provider's ears. Let's just keep it simple and keep it private. My guest today is Carolyn Boldt. Carolyn is personally passionate about holistic health and wellness and is an outspoken advocate that the environment of your space impacts your success. With over 40 years of experience in the commercial interior industry, she holds a Bachelor of Science in Interior Architectural Design from the University of Texas at Austin, is NCIDQ certified, is a registered designer, and a lead AP. In 2004, she and her husband Scott co-founded CrossFields as a design build firm in Atlanta. In 2011, they changed the focus to expand the impact of holistic health by elevating the public's image of alternative medicine through virtually creating outstanding healing environments nationwide. That's a lot going on. Carolyn, thanks for carving out some time to come on Practice Care.
Thanks for having me, Carl.
Yeah, and this is it's a neat topic. It's one that's, I have to tell you, I told you I'd drop this joke. It's out of my element. I can barely dress myself. As a guy, I'm kind of limited to begin with, but I just don't have this instinct. And so I can see when something is obviously horrible, but it's hard for me to distinguish when something is really, really great. So I'm looking forward to this to be uncomfortable for the next 30 minutes or so.
Well, you're not alone. That's most of our clients are exactly
Be-
the same place.
Be kind to me. I imagine half of what you have to do is just to, you say, we should do X. And they go, what do you mean? And just the explanation of getting them from, I don't know what you mean to, I agree with you.
Yeah, it's an
But
education process.
yeah, I'll bet it is. I'll bet it is. Let's start. Regular listeners know where I'm going to start. That bio I read was short. Help us get to know you a bit better.
Yeah, well, yeah, we have a very unique niche, if that's the word you want to call it, is healthcare. And we do all types of healthcare, but we really focus on the alternative health because of our personal experience.
Okay.
And just to give you a brief summary, you talked about being a design build firm. We're in the Atlanta area. My husband is a general contractor and architectural engineer, and I'm an architectural interior designer. And we were doing design build in Atlanta, and our largest client became Life University, which is the chiropractic college here in Atlanta.
Wow.
And they, in the process of working with them, really I started working with them before Scott and I started working together. So 2003, all into 2014, we were doing all kinds of work all over campus, renovating, restoring, building new, all types of things. And they were in a really negative position when we started, and it was about helping them. They almost lost their accreditation, if you know very much about that. They didn't lose it, but it was, so it was a big deal. But the point is that we were there, and the president at the time, Dr. Riekman, said, the image of the university has got to be physically restored to help restore the image of the university, not just the credentials. And it had really gotten pretty worn out, is the best way to describe it, because they'd run out of money and all kinds of things. With all that being said, we started working with them. But what really happened is we got really immersed in the business of alternative health. We began to understand the passion that these people had, but also the uphill battle that they were basically fighting, especially in 2004 and 2005. And at the same time, I was already a chiropractic patient, a holistic patient. My daughter was healed of tonsillitis when she was 2 through chiropractic. I went through functional medicine to heal some deep issues with mine. So I already was a believer in alternative healthcare. I just knew that I was not the common person at that time, know? And so what we saw is that, hey, we could help these practitioners what happened is my chiropractor had a student opening around the corner, and I got to help him. And I fell in love with helping the sole practitioner, the smaller business, as opposed to all big corporations that I'd worked in
They're
up until
such the
that point.
champions,
Oh yeah.
and it's like you
Yeah.
want to like help them level the playing field.
Yes.
Yeah, they're such the
Yes.
champions. Yeah.
Just loved it. Loved it. And
Mhm.
that led me to a couple of referrals of other people. And then we started teaching some classes, had no intention that this is what we're going to do. This was 2009, 10, 11. And we were teaching classes about how your environment, which is what we're going to talk about today, impacts your success. And you
Mhm.
need to pay attention to it.
Mhm.
You can't ignore it.
Mhm.
And we'll go off on that two
Yeah.
paths when we talk, but that's what happened. And so we reinvented ourselves and figured out a way to design these offices virtually, because we knew
Mhm.
there wasn't enough in the Atlanta area. When
Yeah.
we get that small of a niche, we had to get broader in
Yeah.
our reach. And
Mhm.
so we did. So we created some systemized services. No two offices are designed the same, but the service system is the same.
Mhm. Mhm.
And we were able to do that. And then we've got three designers, then none of them are in it near me. We're
Yeah.
all virtual. We're all
Yeah.
virtual. The clients are virtual. COVID helped that. We didn't intend
Yeah.
to be virtual, but it became virtual. So yeah, it's
Yeah.
been good. So that's what we do.
Okay, great. And again, it is a world with which I am unfamiliar. So,
Yeah. Yeah. No. Well,
um,
like I said, that's why we do it,
yeah,
because
yeah. And, when you were sort of educating me, you were talking about, there's the form and function side. There's, I guess, what I'll call the aesthetic, the look and feel side.
yeah.
Um, and maybe, and if I'm going to butcher this, just tell me. But the first question I've got is, it's a broad one. I want you to describe, and I guess it's on the aesthetic side. Maybe not. The question is, how would you describe, describe offices that welcome patients in versus those that do not, just to try to
Okay.
help people understand,
I'm going to go back really quickly on the form and function, and then we can go to it. So
please.
design, the essence of the principle of design, we call it form follows function.
Yeah. Okay.
And what that means to us is that form and function are connected.
Mm-hmm.
Function is the layout and the flow of the space. And
Okay.
most practitioners understand that's important. And we can
Mm-hmm.
talk a little bit about how valuable financially that is.
Mm-hmm.
But then the form is the three-dimensional space.
Okay.
Okay. So just to clarify that. So, and they're both important, but you've got to get the function down before
Mm-hmm.
you do the form, because
Because it's got to function well.
it's got to function well. It's like
Yeah.
putting lipstick on a pig. If your operations are not running,
Yeah.
then it's costing you money. It's your
Yeah.
bathtub leaking.
Yeah.
The form turns on the faucet. So the
Right.
form can attract and retain your patients.
Mm-hmm.
So
But
that's
and the
so
function
going
was
back
makes
to
it
your
efficient and optimized. I gotcha.
exactly.
Okay.
So the efficiency and optimization part of it is not really about your patients initially.
Yeah.
It is as they continue to be patients,
Mm-hmm.
but it's more about your staff and how they their time efficiency,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But the form, the three-dimensional space, is like, I call it, it's like the package of your product.
Okay.
So you do marketing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you do websites. I think we talked about this.
Mm-hmm.
That first impression on that website
Big deal.
needs to be connected, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking about who's your ideal patient. You're
Mm-hmm.
talking about how do you want to show up as your brand?
Mm-hmm.
Because your brand is not a logo, it's the whole persona that
Mm-hmm.
your business becomes. So that needs to be transferred and interpreted when the patient walks in that front door.
Okay.
Because if it's disconnected,
Mm-hmm.
you start to lose trust.
Yeah.
Do you follow me?
Yeah.
So we think as designers, we think about not just healthcare design, because there's definitely a healthcare component to it, but also retail design and
Mm-hmm.
hospitality design.
Okay.
So retail design is that buying first impression.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So if you walk into a store and you're looking to buy something, if that store's environment doesn't match up with what you're expecting to buy,
Mm-hmm.
the story probably will fail.
Yeah.
It's just something that retailers understand, that the design of their space is as important as the products that they're carrying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then hospitality design which would be restaurants and hotels, et cetera.
Yeah.
They understand that environment
Yeah.
is what they're selling. They're
Yeah.
selling the environment even
Yeah.
more than the food that they eat. So if you think about that, that's creating a culture.
Mm-hmm.
And practitioners, they want that culture because that's how that shows up as their brand. So
Mm-hmm.
those are the aesthetic places that we talk
So,
about.
so what do you do? Because when I start working with clients, I'm getting pushier about this, but I want to know, we say the brand, I call it, I just sort of de-jargon it. And I say, look, we have to figure out what's different and valuable about you because you have competition. And typically the answer is, I don't know. So you're saying I need some kind of brand something or other in order to make your office sing. What if they say we don't know. We're not sure. How do you proceed?
Well, if they're not sure,
Because the look and feel on
I
the
don't know.
website, you can make
Yeah,
a very functional,
yeah,
conversion ready, all the things I would want to say about a website,
right, right.
but they could still have no really good culture. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and this is something that they don't learn in school,
No.
right? They learn through the business,
Hmm.
and
Hmm.
every successful business, and it in the marketing side,
Hmm.
has got to stand out, has got to have something,
Hmm.
or else they just get lost in the mist of
Hmm.
stuff, right?
Hmm.
So in some cases that it could be the personal person that's the
Yep.
doctor. If you have your sole practitioner, that doctor and how he shows up and
Hmm.
what he is. But then you start to look at, well, how do you dress? How do you think? How do you,
Right.
if the personal brand is the business, then you
Hmm.
play off the personal brand.
Hmm.
But if you have a multi-doctor practice, you don't want that because most of them are not the same,
Hmm.
sometimes they are. But if you start asking questions like, how do you want to show up to your patients?
Hmm.
They probably can start to answer those questions.
Hmm.
That's kind of the way
Okay.
we start.
Do you like a good example that you could give us, like a before and after? You started with client X and their office was just, repellent to patients. And then, just a couple of things, changes you made, just so we can, at least me, I can wrap my head around. They
Okay.
help me.
Let me tell you one that comes to me because of most people come to us for multiple reasons, right?
Okay.
Some is they're moving, their lease is up, or they bought a building or something, and they actually have a physical change that
Okay.
they're making. Okay. That's about 2/3 of our client are physically making a change, or they're building multiple locations or something, because
Okay.
we start from that ground and build up. But the one that comes to us that has, and even with those, that physical change is an opportunity to do some freshening up
Yeah,
and some
sure.
rebranding and some
Hmm.
things of that sort. So, and they've been there long enough, a lot of them have been there long enough that they kind of have learned that when they're starting out, they want to serve the world.
Hmm.
When they work for, 5 to 10 years, they begin to learn who their ideal client is. I mean, I know I did. I didn't know who
Yeah.
my ideal client was when I first started out. I'd do anything.
Same.
So
I thought I did, but I was just at the beginning. Oh yeah. It just
yeah,
takes time.
yeah,
Yeah.
it evolves, and for us, it totally changed.
Hmm.
So with that, that's part of the process of questioning that. How do you want to show up? And I'm sure it's very similar to what you do when you're
Hmm.
building websites and you're building brand and marketing for people.
Hmm.
How do they want to show up?
Right.
And those words get translated into aesthetic design. So,
Hmm.
you know, fixtures and colors and textures and the height of walls, or the lowness of, all of that type of stuff is a translation that the designer kind of processes through to
Okay.
end up with the finished product.
Okay. But do you have like a
Oh,
before
I was
after
going to tell you
example?
before and after.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I
That's
got
all
off on
right.
tangent. Okay, so the one that comes to me that I love this story, he 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 called himself a country doctor. Okay,
Okay.
he's a chiropractor, but he had just finished his diplomate in functional neurology, which is a big deal.
Yeah.
Okay. And so he knew that he couldn't keep showing up. He was in Seneca, South Carolina. He had a good practice. He works with Clemson. He had the whole thing, but he needed a different image
Okay.
to show up
Hmm.
and have those different types of clients respect him
Mhm.
and be able to charge more money. Because functional neurology was a higher ticket item. It was longer care and things like that than the chiropractic.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that he needed me to turn him into from a country doctor to a, you know, a high
A city slicker. That's
techie
wrong.
type,
But yeah. Yeah. Right.
type of
Yes.
stuff. And
Modern.
so we
Right.
did that, we did that. And he's just, we did that. He was one of our first clients. And I
Okay.
love his testimony. He just said, yeah, it got so much easier to sell.
Yeah. Right.
It was just, that's the biggest thing you see is that it's not that I love working with doctors. I have another one that his CA, not CA, assistant doctor, I met her and right after they had finished their office. And she said, yeah, I'm sitting down with a client, a prospect, patient, excuse
Mhm.
me. I'm sitting down with a patient to talk to them about, what we see and what we're going to present, and the care plan, which includes money and all that. And she said, especially because they're doctors, that's sales of sort.
Mhm.
And they want to pull back because they're always afraid it's going to, is it too much money? Is it too much money? She said, but when I presented it, she said, I had so much more confidence in our price tag.
Mhm.
And she said, I didn't pull back. And she laughs because their room had this wall covering on the wall. And she said, I looked up at that beautiful wall covering and thought, we're worth every penny of this. And she said it was the easiest sale she'd made. And she's
See,
been doing that ever since.
and that helps me. That helps
Image.
me grasp it. Yes. And what came to my mind as you were saying that is Dr. X, if you're listening to this going, oh, it doesn't matter. It may not matter to you. Like you just may not, you may be like me, and you're not all that concerned, although you're probably more concerned than you think you are. But in the grand scheme of things, you're not all that concerned with how things look. But other people are, and you're not the audience. These patients are those who you would like to come for treatment and stay for treatment. And um, they do. And why wouldn't you make something that looks, clean and inviting? Why would you, you know, object to that? So just go
Yeah.
with people who know what clean and inviting really looks like to other people, not just you, because, everybody, the reflex of anybody, I think, is people think the world works for everyone the way it works for them, but it doesn't. And so you just got to if you are poo-pooing this and saying, oh, it doesn't really matter, come on. Yeah, it does. Yeah, it
He
does.
does.
So, yeah.
He was the one that spoke this, and I've used it over and over again. He says, people buy first with their eyes. They
What they
buy.
do is they buy on emotion and they justify with facts, right? So maybe you get the emotional because you got this great, referral from the neighbor. Oh my God, this doctor saved my life or whatever. But it doesn't mean they're going to stay with you forever if the rest of the experience doesn't play out. And if by the way, their first impression, they walk into your your
First
your
impression.
your waiting area and it's kind of gross or I don't know what, not up to date or whatever, it leaves a mark, not the kind of
Yeah.
mark you want to leave. So why would you do this? You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. And it's the, something that's very, very designed very, very well.
Mhm.
We know this about, in the study of design and stuff. Like I'm going to use Apple as an
Mhm.
example. I mean, they are over the top in their design, right?
Mhm.
People buy it because of their design. Do you
Mhm.
know what I'm saying? So
Mhm.
like, why is it designed differently than this over here? And not everyone buys you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
I don't want to get controversial about Apple versus non-Apple, but
But
it's
you could be so ugly that everybody walks away. Don't be that, right?
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
mean,
And
it's hard enough to
it's
compete as a
important.
private practice owner. Don't throw landmines in front of your own path with
Yeah.
an ugly office.
I'm not sure how many dentists you work with, but
Some, yeah.
you can see this happen in the dental industry. I could see it now 30 years ago
Mhm.
in the dental industry. If you think about, if you can go back that far, and I
Mhm.
can't, go
Mhm.
back 30 years ago and you go to your dentist office, it was just an office. It was just an office. It was a little rooms, no big
Mhm.
deal,
Mhm.
etc. Well, the dental equipment companies mostly supported this, but it just started to evolve
Mhm.
because the competition got tougher.
Oh yeah, when you're
So
not the only game in town.
you're not the only game in town. And so how do you show up
Mhm.
better than the next one? So you can see dental practices 30 years ago versus dental practices. We used to tell our doctors, don't go look for chiropractic offices. You're not, because we started out 100% chiropractic. Now we've gone
Yeah.
to all alternatives and stuff. Don't go look for a good looking chiropractic office because you're not going to find one. This was 12 years ago when we started, but you can go look for dental offices because they're good,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's that idea that it's elevating. The other
Yeah.
thing is it's elevating the profession, and it's not,
And by the way, because you said that, it made me think your other audience is your own employees. I mean, does anybody really want to go to a dull, uninspiring place to work every day?
yeah.
They probably don't want to do that,
I
So,
have another story. We did a doctor in Wisconsin, and he bought a practice, and he did what he could to make it look better, right? Paint and new furniture, etc. And he got very involved in community, like networking groups and things like that to
sure.
build his clientele and his patient base. And when we opened his office, one of his things he said, I had a banker and an attorney come in my networking group that I've known for 5 years and would never step foot in my office before. And now they're like, they see him as successful. Do you know what I'm saying? Now
Yeah.
he just easily got new patients.
Image matters. So
that
image matters, and that's what we've been talking about. The other side of it is the function,
Yes.
right? And so the way I phrase the question is just the logic behind it. You can have function that is off and kind of really gets in the way of, optimization, really not optimized at all, and others that are. And the word optimization, we use it in marketing. Every industry can use it. It's a highly accurate word, but nobody knows what it means. So, because it's so broad, right? It's everything's dropped. So the way I wrote it is, the logic behind how office design can increase revenue versus those can kind of get in the way. So, if you could just kind of help us understand that a bit.
So the increased revenue comes
Mhm.
from that form and attraction,
Mhm.
but the increased profit comes from reducing overhead. Okay.
Okay, good.
Okay, that's one. And
Yeah.
and at the same time, if you can reduce, you have the capacity. It can increase your capacity.
Mhm.
So that's what you think about in flow. There's massive studies in manufacturing facilities on
Mhm.
if you can get the flow down, you can create 10 times more widgets.
Yeah.
It's the same idea in a flow of your office with patients.
Okay.
So
More
if you can,
throughput, more patient appointments per day.
more patient appointments per day. If
Got
you're
it.
saving a few minutes, just a few minutes every day with each patient.
Mhm.
So let's just say you're seeing 20 patients a day. I don't know the numbers.
Sure.
Everybody varies, right? You're seeing 20 patients a day, and you can save, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes because everything flows very well and you're not getting stuck and everybody knows what to do next and nobody's waiting. That's, patients hate to wait. Why do patients have to wait for so long? Well, there's inefficiency somewhere, that's happening. So, you can see more patients if you book your calendar and patients are waiting way out. What's happening there?
So there's two reasons. One is not controllable. Well, I guess it could be controlled, but the patients their needs are so complex, you can't really kind of standardize the treatment, right? So then you could try to work on that. But presuming that, like in a dental office, right, every cleaning is kind of, unless somebody walks in with crazy, there is 32 teeth, mouth's about the same size, you can really highly kind of standardize and get to,
Yes.
well, that's about 20 minutes or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So when it's standardizable, but you're all bumping into each other all day long, that's what you're saying, right? If you get rid of all the bumping, maybe you save enough time for a 21st appointment.
Yes. One of the things that we talk about when we design an office, we like to see a 5-foot corridor. This is so simple. It's so simple. It's amazing. You have a 5-foot corridor.
You mean wide?
One, it meets all the codes.
Okay.
But so many chiropractors specifically, but doctors, they go, it's a waste. It's a waste. I can do this. But what happens if you get a code will let you go down to even a 3-foot at some space. When you have a 3-foot corridor and you have 2 people passing, one of them has to stop before the other passes. And if you think about that happening,
yeah,
it could be 10 minutes a day. And if you see a patient takes you 10 minutes, that's another patient for that day.
Yeah.
And then what does that add up over the course of,
yeah,
your
So it's
career.
funny you said it's such a waste, but um, you have to compare that to what you gain by what you just described.
This
You know,
another thing is the
you and I
size of the
bump into
room.
each other and I drop everything I'm carrying.
Yeah.
Well, that
Oh
just
yeah,
really
we
slowed
could get.
things down. Yeah, right. So yes.
So the other thing, imagine the efficiency within an office. We
Hmm.
talk about you need your spaces to be the right size.
Hmm.
If they're too big,
Hmm.
you're wasting rent. Okay.
Hmm.
But if they're too small, they're impeding you.
Hmm.
They're creating a bottleneck. You're creating
Hmm.
little bottlenecks, little bitty bottlenecks to
Yeah.
just go around.
Yeah.
So just finding that right space. Some people move into offices that are already existing and they just make it work for them.
Yeah.
But we have stories of they make it work for them and they're putting a treatment room in a room that's way too small, and everything they do in that room is slower, and it's frustrating.
Yeah.
It's not only time, but it's also the
Yeah.
emotional rub that it
Yeah.
goes.
And you know what? You could, I mean, think of it. You could either jam in another patient appointment in this example that we're building, or you could say, you know what, I'm going to spend a few more patient minutes with each patient. And then
Create a
they're
different
happier, which
quality.
is really what people, I mean, everyone feels rushed. I mean, at least when it's insurance based, for the most part, everyone feels rushed. I know patients do. I can from my side, I imagine, I mean, practitioners feel it too. Um, and so you'd have the option of staying that pace and adding more, or slowing down a touch and spending more time. Um, your retention will go up if you spend a few more minutes, that's for sure. The most expensive thing any practice can do is try to find another new patient. So why don't you just keep
Exactly.
the ones you already have happy,
Keep
you
the ones
know,
you have happy.
and then
But
you
if
can,
you're reducing your steps, if you're reducing those types of things, that's saving that
everything
time.
gets better. I mean, this is
Everything
where we
gets
can bring
better.
the word optimization back in. It's now optimal. So everything's better because it's optimal by definition. So
Exactly.
yeah, yeah,
Exactly.
cool. It's really it's interesting. I had said to you, I had met somebody else who did really on flow, and I had a
Mhm.
really hard time grasping it. But that's really just a piece of it. It's yeah, I mean, function is more than flow, I guess, right? So even where things are placed in a room, I
Right,
imagine
right,
matters.
right. Well,
Yeah.
function, when we talk about function, we talk about the size of the space,
Hmm.
so you get the square footage in
Yep.
your correct. And then we talk about the flow. So we kind of marry those two together.
Sure.
That's under the umbrella of function.
Sure. I got it. I got it. And like I say to every other guest, you know, we could spend hours on this, but we're of the bite-sized variety of business advice. So there's a couple of wrap-up questions I ask every guest. First one is, in the context that we talked about and the depth we went into, is there anything you think we should have covered that I just didn't ask you about? Or anything else that comes to mind you say, you know, we want to get this in?
I guess the other piece of it that I just want to express
Okay.
is that interior design in the commercial industry is a part of business expense. It's a business requirement for most larger businesses.
Okay. You mean to be
Okay.
competitive? Like to,
It's just like you need it designed well for it to they understand it already. That's what I'm trying
okay.
to say. So in the corporation, when I used to do all the corporate design, they already understood. You
Hmm.
need an interior architectural designer to get it to flow right and to get the aesthetics right so that we make money.
Right.
Okay. They
Yeah.
already know it. So my mission is to get the small practitioner to understand they're not any different. They're a business.
Hmm.
And interior design for the commercial industry is not a luxury like it is in residential.
No.
It is a business.
It's funny. You're bringing me back. My father owned a pharmacy growing up, and I would work in it, and I was forever cleaning things, cleaning the inventory, cleaning the stock, vacuuming it, and I hated every minute of it. But you say this now, it's like, look, it's got to stay clean. It's got to stay presentable. It just does.
It
It's
just does.
otherwise you're
Exactly.
going to see it's going to bite. It's going to come back to bite you if you don't.
It is. It
Yeah.
is very much so.
Yeah.
So yeah, my point is interior architectural design is not a luxury.
Yeah.
It is a wise
Right.
business decision.
Which means you've got to, it's got
And
to
it
be,
doesn't have to be expensive. I
I
just
was
want
just
to
going
add
to
that one
say, you
thing.
got to
It,
plan it. You got to have your point of view. That doesn't mean that you go luxury, but it
not at
just
all.
means you're not going haphazard and whatever
Yeah.
either.
You
You're
can
not
do
being
so
flippant.
much with paint and light. Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
And that's inexpensive in
Yeah.
comparison to, so
Yeah.
it's,
And
yeah,
other than people like Carolyn, they're going to get the feel you want. They're not going to like, look, why would you use that light fixture? 10 out of 10 patients are not going to ask you that question. And they're not
no,
going
they
to
just,
think about it either. They're going to walk in and go, oh, I'm just going to sit down and do my thing. There's like nothing in, you're not going to get anyone to go, ugh, like, somebody walking and going, ugh, that's death.
Yeah.
That's death to the relationship right there is, ugh.
Well, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna say that I don't want to sound what's the word, but the majority of doctors will tell me, and you heard this too, who's your ideal patient? It's the young to middle age white.
Actually, what I get is anybody with insurance. I'm like, that's
Okay.
really not the answer. You know, is it
But
really? Is it really that the answer? What if they yell at you all day long? Or what if
yeah.
they, yeah, anyway, keep going.
But the point is because they recognize that that's the health decision maker in the family, right? So that's
Yeah.
not all they see, but that's the one that's going to kind of drive the choices.
Mhm.
And most women do understand design. They do.
Well, and
They think about
they're not sheepish about it if they don't like something. They may not say it out loud, but like that place was gross. How was the new
yeah,
doctor? The place is gross. Like, all right,
yeah,
guess we're looking
yeah,
around.
yeah,
Yeah,
especially. So
absolutely. Yes. The other wrap-up question I ask is, where could somebody get started on this? So let's say, the scenarios we've caught a listener's attention. They're like, you know what, she's right. She makes sense. But people like they know what to do about this, and they don't, but they have to get started somehow. I'm not saying go buy paint and take the weekend and, you know, turn your office around, but they need to get started. So how can they get started? Even to figure out, is this me? Like if you're like me and I say I can barely dress myself, and I had an office, I work from home, it could be a disaster. And I probably don't know it because I've let it go this long. So how could they get started?
how could you get started? So
Yeah.
we were several years ago wrote a checklist. We call it our designer 5-point checklist.
Okay.
And it literally is the 5 things that we look at when we first look at an office. If somebody brings us an office, these are
Mm-hmm.
like, we kind of do it all at one time, but if we had to break it apart,
Mm-hmm.
here's this checklist. And so we created it as a checklist to
Okay.
literally print. And if you do that, print, but write in and go through and check it off. And the first one that we have is, what is your first impression? But you'll see this in the checklist, and it's a free resource for your listeners. Your first impression, don't you decide what your first
Yeah,
impression.
find somebody else. Yeah.
You got to find someone else, and you got
Mm-hmm.
to find a trusted advisor that'll be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
And ideally, it's someone that is or like your ideal client,
Mm-hmm.
your ideal patient.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
that's where
And
it starts.
so we've got the link to your checklist. We'll put it in the show notes for your episode. There you go. So anybody who wants it and you've listened to this episode, just go to the show notes and you will find it.
Yeah, and it gives you some ideas of what you can do.
Okay.
Also, okay,
Perfect. But
it's
it
not
sounds
just.
like it's a way to diagnose, do I really have a problem here or not?
It is a diagnostic tool. Yes,
Perfect.
very much so.
Perfect. That's a good place to start. Excellent. Carolyn, thank you. Thank you for coming on Practice Care. I don't feel as uncomfortable and out of my league as I thought I might, but you never know.
Oh yeah, you didn't. I couldn't do what you do either. We're all gifted with different gifts. So
But I appreciate it. So I appreciate you taking the time. So yeah, thanks for coming on Practice Care.
yes, enjoyed it. Thank you for having me very much.
Yeah, and you supplied some contact information for you and your firm, which we are also in the show notes to your episode. So
Okay.
anybody who wants to get a hold of you now has another way to do
Yes.
so. A couple of
Yes.
points before we wrap up. First, if you're someone like Carolyn or me, us, and you serve private practice owners, or if you're a private practice owner yourself, either way, you've got some experience on the business side of private practice you think other practice owners would benefit from, please, we want you to come on Practice Care and let's record it so that we can get it out to the world. In the show notes for Carolyn's episode and every episode, there's a link, a couple of clicks. It's really quick and easy. Tell us what's on your mind so we can get you scheduled as soon as possible. And finally, we're on Apple, we're on Spotify, we're on Amazon, we're just about everywhere, YouTube as well. Subscribe to Practice Care. We drop a new episode every week, and that is far and away the easiest way to stay up to date with all those new episodes. Thanks very much, and until next time.